All right. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the new episode of Rethink Life. And this week, we're talking about stop living in denial. Anyways, so what we're going to be talking about and exploring is a letter from a mother to her son, a son who lives life the hard way, illustrating the detached point of view that should characterize all so-called human relationships and will characterize them if there is love, capital L, that impersonal thought force of spirit. So I'm going to read a bit of this letter. It says, "My dear, each of us has demands made upon him that he needs to live and grow, to discover himself. Those of us who meet these demands to give up the personal sense of self and the rebellion and hurt over the actions of another, no matter what it costs in the way of self-discipline, are living. Those of us who go to pieces, feel sorry for ourselves, and are filled with resentment and blame another for what is our own faulty vision are not living. Such a one only postpones the inevitable day when life makes a demand for self-discipline that cannot be ignored. Those who blame others, their parents, their teachers, etc., for their difficulties are not living creatively because they do not love. The love, capital L, spiritual vision, to experience the God idea joyously, whatever incident may seem to be, is the creative living that will transform your world. Love
That's
never...
really
What? Go ahead, Betty.
So it's really good. You should read it again.
Okay. The love, and in parentheses, spiritual vision, to experience the God idea joyously, whatever the incident may seem to be, is the creative living that will transform your world.
Yep.
Love never expects to be loved because the love, capital L, you love with is the love that loves you. If another can hurt you, make you unhappy and rebellious, and if the incidents of daily life can throw you for a loop, you can be sure you do not love. If you loved, you would have the intelligence to see that you yourself are the arbiter of your fate." And that last part is from Margaret Laird's What is the Idea on page 43 and 44.
All of it that you read is from there.
Oh, I thought that was from the letter, that other booklet you
The
were...
letter is in Margaret's right.
Oh, okay. All right. Very cool. All right. So what else would you like to say to add to that as this discussion, stop living in denial?
Yep. And when you have circumstances and people and places and stuff like that as the reason for anything at all, you're in denial. Because just as Margaret said in that last sentence you read, you yourself are the arbiter of your fate.
Mhm.
You generate everything going on with you, whether you know it or not.
Mhm.
So who you're being shows up as how you're being and what you're being.
Right. You know, it reminds me of the animated short that we watched. That's also a children's book called The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse.
And great.
And in there, and I highly recommend that you check it out. It's on
It's a children's book.
It's on Disney, actually. Or no, it's on Apple TV is where it is. But if you watch it, it's a children's book. You can also go get the book. But in this little short, animated short, they said the greatest freedom, and I'm going to butcher this, but Mom, you can correct me. The greatest freedom is your reaction to what happens. And I love that. Just think about that. Your greatest freedom is the ability to choose your reaction to whatever happens.
That makes sense. That's better than saying the freedom is the reaction.
No, the freedom to choose your reaction no matter what happens.
Yep.
That's you. That's your choice. You have this greatest freedom. I just loved that. And it's just such a good, just a good all around animated short. It's about 30 minutes long.
Well, we're so automatic in blaming, I was late because the bus didn't come. We've got a reason, all kinds of stuff for everything that occurs. It never occurs, oh, I wonder why I generated having that bus come late. Must be that I don't have to get there yet.
Right.
We don't ever do that. What we do is say, where's the bus? It's not here.
Right.
You
And I remember a story from you when you needed to get somewhere. I don't know if it was for a job interview or to be on time to work or whatever, when you were in Maryland, before I ever existed. But the bus arrived, you were going to be late. You got on that bus and there was no way that bus was going to have you be on time to work. And yet you walked into work on time.
Yeah, it was an important meeting relative to work. It wasn't the work itself, but yeah, and that was true. I sat there on the bus and I thought, now, that is not what runs my life. Life is being itself being, and it's divine and perfect and whole. And there isn't any such thing as not being on time in that realm. And that was going through my thought processes, I guess, as I was sitting on the bus. But when I got off the bus, I was right on time. It was amazing. It isn't like I could drive and with speeding to get there or whatever. I was actually on a public bus. And it runs on schedule, picked me up when it did, and there was no way that I could be down there in the middle of, I was out in Virginia, and no way to be down there in the middle of Washington, D.C. by the time that I needed to be there. And when I stepped off the bus, I was right on time, just right on. It was like, how did that happen?
Right.
But time is not a law.
Right.
Time is a belief system. And if you're not a believer in the belief system, you've got some freedom.
Right. Dominic Free wrote, it's all about a different viewpoint, right?
It's all about who you're being, wherever you are. And the viewpoint, there are lots of different viewpoints. So it's not a matter of just shifting the viewpoint, but it's like for a second or two to just let go of all the stuff you've got going on about who you are and where you are and what's going on and how much time it takes and oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. And when you let go of that, whatever occurs is whatever occurs. Mm-hmm. But the freedom from that removes you from the role of victim.
Right.
And on we go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. All right. So we dive in.
Yep.
All right. So from What is the Idea, which is a pamphlet written by Margaret Laird, on page 44, she wrote, the reality must be faced, that it is not what life brings to us, but what we bring to life in our spirit that is important.
And the note goes with that.
Mm-hmm. What life does to us in the long run will depend on what life finds in us.
That's right.
There is no out there.
Yep. One thing going on.
Yeah.
To us and as us is all one thing.
Right. So when we say the stop living in denial, are we talking about stop living in denial of the facts of who we are?
Yeah, we're in denial of being in charge. We're in denial of being the arbiter of our own fate. Mm-hmm. We're in denial of being responsible for the whole thing.
Right.
Invented it, executed it, here I am.
Right.
Oh no. I didn't have anything to do with the bus.
Mm-hmm.
It's really a where you're coming from. It's a recognition of what's actually a fact.
Mm-hmm.
I'm either being a two-legged animal rushing around accomplishing nothing, or I'm being myself, even if it's for an instant. And the instant that you are being yourself, divine perfection, present, functioning perfectly, in that instant, the whole thing that you're living with, believing that you're a two-legged animal, shifts, because it has to align with the perfection that that instant calls forth. So it isn't like it's a long, arduous struggle. It's like if for a moment I can become conscious of the fact of my own being, everything shifts.
Right. Right.
And it looks how it looks.
Right. And Dominique said, isn't our viewpoint dictated by who we think we are?
It's who you're being, yes. And if you're being a belief of yourself, you got that. So you want to be, you know, if you're believing in a fiction, then you're blind to what's actually true. If understanding gives you the vision to allow it to be however it looks, because there's only one thing going on, that gives you some freedom. It's like fact or fiction, which way?
Right. Right, exactly. Very cool. All right. And Mary Baker Eddy in Science and Health on page 304, starting on line 14, wrote, the spiritual man's substantiality transcends mortal vision and is revealed only through divine science. So substantiality isn't material.
That's right. It's not found in language.
Mm-hmm.
The spiritual man's substantiality is reality itself. It's not something I can put my finger on. It's not something I can see physically.
Yeah.
It's not part of the belief system that we're two-legged animals.
Sure. And that's kind of interesting because, you know, when we think about substance, we think about material, but substantiality has nothing to do with that.
The physical look of things has been given that position of substantial, but it actually doesn't exist that way.
Right.
It's all a point of view.
Right.
And it's how you're living that view that makes a difference. So it's always, who am I being?
Mm-hmm.
Not what does it look like?
Right. Right. All right. And Mary Baker Eddy, a little bit more discussion. She wrote, the belief that man has any other substance is not spiritual. Yeah, there isn't any fact in the pen.
Yep.
There's just no fact in the pen. There's no substantiality here. It's merely a reflection of reality in the best way I can view it.
Or here.
Right, exactly. I'm just using this as a...
Yeah, the pen is the same thing as the Betty sitting in the chair.
Right. Go put it in the corner in the chair with... Just go sit with your pen in the corner, Betty.
Right.
And you wrote in Mind is the Athlete on page 14, the possibility of science is to manifest in visible form that causative consciousness is not separate from who you and I are.
Yep. That's a mouthful to assimilate.
It is. The possibility of science is to manifest in visible form that causative consciousness is not separate from who you and I are.
Yeah. It isn't something you have to conjure up. It isn't something that occurs if you believe it. It is a fact present that you either recognize or are blind to.
Right.
And if you're living in a belief of good, you're blind to good, because all you've got is where you've set the limits. This is good. Oh, well, then there isn't any good anywhere else. You've got it right there in that little whatever.
Right.
So it's always a self-recognition that we're up to if if we're living with science.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't much matter what shape it takes or what circumstances come up. If anything is true, it's just fine.
Yeah.
What's going on is exactly right.
Yep.
And if I allow it to be, trusting the principle that's functioning called reality, I'm home free.
Mm-hmm.
If I try to manipulate it, organize it, manage it, complain about it, fuss over it, rearrange it, all those things, like a two-legged animal running around madly trying to run things,
Mm-hmm.
I'm in total disarray.
Right.
Chaos is the name of the game.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. And in What is the Idea on page 44, Margaret Laird wrote, "No one finds life worth living. Each one has to make it worth living."
Yep.
That's a good one.
Yep.
That's a good one. It's like the quote that popped into my head right then is, be the joy you want to see in the world.
Absolutely. And you always are.
Exactly. But I'm just saying, you always think it's
world,
out there. It's the denial of, oh, I would be accepted and because of, and oh, this and ba. But it's like, be the transformation you want to see in the world.
that's the only time that you are being yourself.
Yeah.
Because you are the arbiter of your experience.
Yeah.
So if I'm being the joy that's ever present, my world's going to look different than if I'm being the complaint because it doesn't fit my pictures.
Right. Right. All right. The way is always the way of love. The capacity to spiritually evaluate every difficult experience and turn it into a major achievement.
Yep. And that's a good definition of love. The capacity to spiritually evaluate
every difficult situation, difficult experience, and turn it into a major achievement.
Yep.
You know, I was listening to a podcast the end of last week, and they were interviewing, it was called Think Smart and Talk Fast. Think Fast and Talk Smart. Anyways, it's either one of those. Anyways, that's the name of the podcast. And they were interviewing a guy named Graham Weaver. And since then, I've listened to a lot of these talks by him, but he talks about the 4 principles of asymmetrical living. And one of them is do hard things. And the thing there is that the life you want is on the other side of worst. So you do hard things, things are going to get worse before they get better. But the life you want is on the other side of worst. And I thought, oh my God. And there's a couple more. There's 4 things, and they're really, really good. And then the final one is write your story. And not write your story like you're looking back and talking about your life, but that you're writing the story that's yet to be, and then you're having that occur. And it's a really neat way to think about this, the capacity to spiritually evaluate every difficult experience and turn it into a major achievement.
Yep.
And so that's another good really tidbit. If for those of you who want to go explore that. His name's Graham Weaver. He's actually a professor at Stanford. All right. And then in Science and Health on page 301, starting on line 26, Mary Baker Eddy said, a supposed standpoint outside the focal distance of infinite spirit presents an inverted image with everything turned upside down. You want to say more about that?
It's like a make-believe.
Mm-hmm.
A supposed standpoint. That would be one I was making up.
Right. And yet it looks so real.
But it's outside the focal distance of infinite spirit. So it's another way of describing belief that you've got going on.
Mm-hmm.
A supposed standpoint outside the focal distance of infinite spirit.
Mm-hmm.
So this is like two-legged action.
Right.
Okay.
We make our own fake news.
And it presents an inverted image, fake news. Yeah. With everything turned upside down. Sure.
Right. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, very cool. I like that. These are really good. Like the quotes that we're going through today are like really good because you can like almost, like they have substantiality.
Yep.
All right. And in your book, Mine is the Athlete, on page 18, you wrote, within each of us, abilities and capacities beyond current evidence exist untapped, unrecognized, and unheralded.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because of our own limiting beliefs, I suppose.
Yeah, the note goes with it too.
Here we go. The discovery of yourself as an aware spiritual being capable of designing every aspect of your life brings comfort, assurance, and a priceless sense of aliveness and well-being.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, it does. When you're a victim, but when you're like there and it's vital and you're alive and you have that sense of being capable.
All as well.
Yeah, being capable no matter what in the face of anything. That's priceless. Because
right.
The freedom, again, I go back to that quote from The Boy, the Horse, the Mole, and the Fox, in that it's like the greatest freedom is the ability to choose your reaction in any situation.
In that book, in that little book, the thing that I loved the most was, what do you want to be when you grow up? And this little kid's sitting there thinking, and he says, kind.
Mm-hmm.
That's the name of the game.
Yeah.
Because he took responsibility for his own well-being.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the little mole sees cake everywhere.
Yep.
He comes out of the ground, he finds the little guy, the little boy who's lost, and he looks off and he goes, there's a cake right over there. And he starts going over there and he gets closer and he goes, it's like cake. He's just like salivating for this cake. And as he gets closer and closer, it's a tree covered with snow. It's not cake. Anyways, I don't want to give it away. No spoiler alerts here. But it's the discovery of yourself as an aware spiritual being capable of designing every aspect of your life brings comfort, assurance, and a priceless sense of aliveness and well-being.
It does. Any degree of self-discovery gives you freedom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. And in What is the Idea? Again, on page 44, Margaret Laird wrote, the way of love, capital L, looking for everything impersonally as the demand of truth for recognition leads to dominion.
Yep.
So say more about that.
Well, read the note that goes with it. That helps.
Oh, okay. Here we go. It is our belief of what is good that keeps us from experiencing the good in full measure. It's our concept of good.
Yeah. One of the points that Margaret Laird makes over and over and over in her writings is the problem is not the belief in something bad. It's the limitation of what you believe is good that cuts you off from all the rest of the good that's everywhere.
Right, because we're more than happy to let go of what we believe is bad.
But that never is a roadblock. The roadblock is your belief in good.
Right, because we're more than happy to let the bad go, and the good, we're like, it's kind of like that story, that joke, that the guy falls off the cliff, and as he's falling, he reaches out and he grabs onto this branch, and so he's hanging by this branch to this abyss below, and he says, God, please, save me, if you're up there, and God, I'll do anything you say, I promise I'll do anything you say. I'll be so good, blah, 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 blah. And he hears this voice, and it comes down and it says, let go. The guy's holding on, and he looks up and he says, is there anyone else up there?
Yeah.
So anyways, it's the really the ability to just let it be, isn't it?
And allow it to look however it looks. Because you don't have to be a victim ever.
Yeah.
Unless you choose to. And you always choose to when you take a look at the picture around you and nail it as good.
Right.
Or as inevitable. Or as right. Or,
Yep, for sure. All right. And in your book, and Mary Baker Eddy wrote in Science and Health, starting on page 302, line 8, it is impossible that man should lose aught that is real when God is all and eternally his.
Yep.
Okay. Anything more on that one? Or I should just read the note.
Well,
belief is all that will ever be lost.
Belief is all that you ever can lose. Because it's a thing that doesn't exist.
Well, how can you lose it if it doesn't exist?
How do you even believe it if it doesn't exist?
Well, yeah, I make up my own fake news. Okay.
There you go.
All right, I got it.
So Mrs. Eddy said man's true consciousness is in the mental likeness to spirit. And I read that 2 or 3 times before I picked up on the mental likeness to spirit. It's not the visual, not the physical, nothing you can see, feel, hear, taste, touch, none of that. It's the mental likeness to spirit.
Yeah.
And most of us don't think that way at all.
Right.
But it's what's there showing up in a language we understand. But if we think the language is the answer, we're lost. Yep.
Right. And yet we point to it and say, see, as if that made the difference.
Well, and as if there was somebody that had to believe it.
Right.
Otherwise, why would you point to it?
Right. Interesting. Okay. All right. And then in your book, Mind is the Athlete, on page 19, you wrote, universal consciousness, self-expressing, shows up physically as all, form and substance, including our human existence. So it shows up physically as all form and substance, including our human existence. It's only one thing going on, and this is what it looks like.
Yeah, but what is it actually? Universal
consciousness.
And universal means it's not isolated in this little thing I'm looking at.
Right.
There's nothing to do with that. That's just language. It's actually,
and language exists inside of all of or is sourced by all of universal consciousness.
Well, language is just my view. What's really present is universal consciousness.
Got it. Showing up the only way I can see it.
Yeah. So I'm not beginning to recognize with any authority what's actually present if I'm taken up with the language view.
Right.
It's like what Shakespeare said, there's a divinity that shapes our ends. Well, if there's a divinity that shapes our ends, how come we think it's our education or our job or our money or you name it? It's not any of that.
Right.
It's just language identifying the look of things the best way I can see it. And if I don't like it, as Margaret used to say, pay attention to your seeing. You're the one that has to look like that.
Right. Right. Yep. Very good. All right. Well, any last words you want to say on stop living in denial?
Yeah, and give it some attention to the fact that who you are, the reality present, showing up in the language you call yourself. That is the source of your experience every moment.
Mm-hmm.
Who you are is present.
Yes.
You can live it however you see it, and we do live it however we see it. But if you're aware, you can begin to look beyond the obvious and recognize that there's something else that has it live, move, and have being.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep, very good. All right. So we will thank you guys so much. Enter any of your comments in. We love to get those. Thank you so much for participating. And we will be here next week on Tuesday, 5 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Central. And we'll see you then. Until then, wait, we might have a comment. Dominique, you're so welcome. Thank you so much. And anyways, until then, we will see you and go out there and practice with the freedom of being in control of your reaction, no matter the look. Just play with it. Have fun. Go for it. Surprise yourself. And we'll see you next week. All right. Bye.